Hello and welcome to episode 34 of the LiveFitNow Podcast. Thank you very much for joining me today. I cannot wait for you to listen to today's conversation. I am speaking to another old school friend today, but I would like to just give a little warning that we are covering a subject area that some people may find a little bit triggering. We will pop some links in the show notes. Please do reach out for help should you be triggered by anything in today's episode. Having said that, this really is a fantastic conversation. I think it will open all of our eyes and get us thinking about a subject that we might not have realised was a massive problem for lots of people. So, without further ado, here's the conversation. I have known my guest today since secondary school. We are going to discuss a very important issue today, and it is one that has played a big part in his life. And he too has started his very own podcast on the subject area, and the podcast is called The Invisible Addiction. Now, most people will at some point in their lives gamble in some way. Whatever your own relationship with gambling, I truly believe you will take something from this conversation. I feel privileged that he has come on my show to share his story and raise awareness to the problems we have in our society around gambling. Welcome to the show, Alex Lewis. How are you today?
Thanks, Vicki. I'm great. Yes. What an introduction. It's I've gone bright red over here.
Yeah. Oh, you're very welcome. And it's so true. There's so many questions I have. I've already said to you before we start this. But I guess the best place for us to introduce you to the audience is just give us a little bit of a background about perhaps how you started gambling and then what made you start the podcast. And that's really quite a broad spectrum, but take it as you will.
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me on the podcast. It's always great to speak to you and to share ideas and to be able to share my story. So I suppose it is going to be quite a long story. So
go for it.
and I do like to chat, so apologies in advance. But yeah, I mean, I got into gambling kind of as a kid. I was kind of exposed to it. I had family members that gambled. My mum liked to play the lottery and buy scratch cards, and my granddad would play kind of pontoon or cards for pennies at Christmas. And then I remember going once. I went on holiday to Ireland, and we were allowed as kids then to bet at the Greyhound track, which was quite crazy. And then like seaside arcades, so the famous 2p machines and stuff.
We've all done it.
Yeah, I know, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy that they've been able to make a whole TV program out of that with Tipping Point and stuff. But and
I think I don't want to interlude your story, but I actually think that's such a brilliant thing to bring up, that I actually think people don't even realise that's gambling. Like it's just a bit of fun. They don't think, oh, I'm going to gamble. I'm going to give my kid 2p so you can go and gamble in the corner. That's not how we think about it, I don't think.
No, not at all. I mean, even now speaking about it, it's like a part of me doesn't want to believe it. I'm like, well, it's just fun, isn't it? It's not gambling. Actually, going off on a bit of a tangent, but I live down in Southsea in Portsmouth, and they've got an arcade around the corner, and I had a look, and it's kind of crazy when you go in with different set of eyes and thinking, and you kind of observe. And I went and had a look, and it's really crazy that there's fruit machines for kids with like £5 jackpots and stuff. It's it's nuts, really. It's nuts. But yeah, so that was kind of like early childhood experiences, and then about 15, 16, went to Newby Races, the horse racing track, which obviously very famous for, and just kind of got into betting. Didn't have a clue, by the way, with the horse racing. I was just betting on the names or the colours and stuff, but enjoyed the day out. And then it got to kind of around sixth form, so about so just turning 18 and going out for the first time, and such like. And then it was kind of this craze, like on a Friday, like we'd go down in the during free periods and stuff, and go into the bookies basically, and friends would place bets on the horses, and and then football accumulators as well. So, betting on a number of teams and trying to predict the outcome, win, draw or lose. And I didn't have any luck with those actually at all. So yeah, it got to 1 week, and I remember one of my friends was playing, like he was very quiet. He's quite loud, but he's being, acting very quietly. And he was on a machine in the corner, and I went and had a look, and it was basically he was playing roulette, the roulette wheel, like what they term like fixed odd betting terminals. I had a go, and my first bet won. I think 20p I placed, and I remember it well. Black 17, the number came out, and I was just like hooked into this buzz and the excitement of this magical new thing. And that's kind of how it started.
So that particular experience, that one moment, was completely different from all the other previous experiences. It was a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
Do you think it was that type of gambling, particularly the game, the style, or was it just a moment in time that you can't really put your finger on?
I think it was something to do with the game, because there was kind of this, I don't know, touch of like class about it in a way. The roulette wheel, the associations with casinos and like James Bond, and the trendiness, and dressing up for the occasion, and even though it was in a bookies, there was this kind of glamorization of it, and it was something to do with the game, the wheel, the spin, the sounds, the adrenaline as well, like, and then also how easy it was. It's like, well, blimey, I put 20p on, I think I won £7.20. That's, my maths is terrible, but I think that's about 36 to 1 odds. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I'd never won any other bet before. And so I was just like, well, this is a mugs game. This is easy. Pretty much from then on in, I was just, that was it. That was the roulette was then my fix, basically. And
did that, from that moment, pick up how many times you actually went gambling, or was it still fairly irregular at that point, or is that when the sort of momentum started to pick up with how often and how much you did it?
Yeah, good question actually. Because it's funny, because I kind of when I was about 18, 19, I kept a diary, which is quite embarrassing, but it's quite interesting to look back. And so, in answer to your question, I was going a bit more frequently. So I started to go on my own, had access to a car, learned how to drive, and then, was starting to go, rather than just every Friday, I was going maybe 2 or 3 times a week. So I wasn't going every day, but with a part-time job and having sort of extra cash at that young age, it was just, I was, and I wasn't even interested in the football anymore or any other betting. It was just the roulette. And it was just this weird kind of like new hobby, like a relationship between me and this machine. It was, very odd.
Did you have a moment when you realized it was becoming an issue, or it was perhaps taking over, or perhaps that it wasn't good for you?
Yeah, it's a funny one, really, because I think the first time I felt it became an issue was I'd actually had an incident with the police. I'm not very proud of it. It's quite embarrassing, but what had happened was I got in trouble with the police, and they'd actually gone to my home, or my parents' home, and my dad called me up and he was like, "Look, where are you?" basically, and I had to lie. It was the first time I had to lie because I'd been in the bookies basically for a couple of hours. At 18 years old, and that was probably the first time I realized it was a little bit of a problem, because I was like, well, I'm going to have to start covering up and start lying. But then it's interesting, because then I went to uni, and for about 3 years, I did bet, but I was a student. I was doing other things. And so it really became a problem probably in my early 20s. So, yeah.
That's interesting. So it was a slow burner, really. And was there anything that happened that took it to the next level?
Yeah, I think it was going to the casinos. That was where it really kind of ramped up. I was living so after uni, I moved to Victoria, central London, and had a job and a big company, and it was kind of, like a graduate dream sort of thing, finishing and getting a nice salary job and with a shirt and tie and stuff. And I think I was living with a living landlady, but she was hardly around. I didn't have any mates around in London. I was just like, I studied geography, so this is like the geography coming out. Do you ever remember that whole, like, what do they call it? Oh my goodness, the push or pull factors, like the pull factors of like the bright lights, literally the bright lights in Leicester Square and Piccadilly and stuff. And so it was the Olympic year as well, 2012, and I was just like, right, I'm going to get myself down the casinos just to see what this is all about. I went on my own, and that was the kind of the start of the problem, because I was, as I say, going on my own, going late at night, spending all night out, and then of course spending a lot of time literally just gambling. And then of course the amount of money, everyone thinks with gambling it's the amount of money. Yes, the money is the issue, but it's then the kind of the harm that it does to you, sort of emotionally, and that kind of damage. But that was when it sort of started to become a sort of quite a big problem, basically.
So you went on your own. Did you find that you made a network of friends within the community, or were you staying very isolated throughout? Was it a very sort of lonely experience?
It was lonely. Very lonely. It was bizarre, because I love the social aspect, in terms of there's loads of people around, lots of people fairly smart, kind of smartly dressed. There's a bar in there. I think it was the Euro 2012, so I was watching the football, was having a couple of drinks. And I just love the atmosphere of the casinos. Like, I'm kind of envious of people that can still go, because I get it. People will have a nice time, and it is a nice experience for lots of people. But I was going on my own, and it was just incredibly lonely. I would go, and apart from asking for a drink at the bar or saying, could I exchange this amount of cash for some chips, I wouldn't speak to anyone. And that would be for like hours on end. It takes you to a very, very lonely place. But again, it was a problem, but it was almost like I've always been quite independent, so in a way I quite enjoyed it. But obviously you get down into a deep, deep dark hole, and that's very hard to kind of escape, really. So
very lonely in a busy room. I think that's so often as well, isn't it?
It's London for you, isn't it? I think, the hustle and bustle, they say London's really busy, but it can also be quite lonely as well. So
yeah. And I'm guessing you said you started going into the hole. Where was the bottom of the hole for you? What made you realize I need to stop, or I need some help, or made you wake up from realize actually what you were doing?
Yes, it's a weird one, because I continued to I had to move home. I mean, there was a kind of a few rock bottoms, if you like. You can always have a bigger low, if that makes sense. But there was a series. So that was like around 21, 22. I moved home back with my parents. I'd set up a sort of 6-a-side football league, which was so I kind of moved to be self-employed, and started to kind of teaching the drums and other bits and pieces. And then it kind of, it wasn't a problem then, as it were. But then I moved back into London, and then it became a bigger problem, because I'd gone within 6 months. I had like a few grand in the bank in savings, not much, but a few grand. And then within 6 months, I'd had to move home, because I'd spent I was about £10,000 in debt from a lot of harm, as I say, going to the casinos. And that was a big low, because I'd gone from kind of quote unquote living the dream. I was self-employed, working 2 or 3 days a week, and I was doing football refereeing, and I was a musician and going out on tour and doing some really cool things. And that 6 months was painful, because I was just doing so much damage to myself financially, and I had to move home. I had to take a job at Pret a Manger, like part-time, just to sort of make ends meet. I was starting to lie and borrow money from my parents. I had to move home because I couldn't keep the rent up. I remember sitting at 6 o'clock in London, in Westminster, where I worked at Pret a Manger in the morning, just before my first shift. I'd taken up smoke. I just really weird things, but I just remember sitting there just thinking, what am I doing? Like, this is just ridiculous. But yeah, there were plenty more, like, you know, it sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it? But there were plenty more rock bottom moments, but that was probably the first one. Yeah, definitely.
It's almost the impossible question I'm about to ask, because I know you can't go back in time. But do you think you would have spiraled in the same way if you hadn't moved to London or moved to a big city? Do you think that was a big part of it, coping with city life? Or do you just think it facilitated something that could have easily happened if you'd stayed in Berkshire?
Do you know what? I've never thought of it like that. I definitely think there could be substance in that. Definitely. I think, the loneliness of a big city, the excitement of a big city, the allure of, the casinos and other things like that. I think, but the thing is, I think I'd always been, as I say, I've been gambling at 18 in Berkshire anyway. So it was probably only a matter of time wherever I was, I would have wanted, it was almost, I viewed the casinos as a step above. So the roulette machine was one thing, but I wanted to experience what I classed as like the real thing. Yeah. So yeah, a bit of both actually, I think, in answer to your question, a bit of a sitting on the fence answer.
That's fair enough. It was an impossible question. And at what stage did you think I've got an addiction? When did that come in?
Oh, good question. I think I didn't want to admit it at that point when I had to move home after the Pret a Manger, working in London and stuff. And I remember I classed myself as I said to myself, like, if I'm living at home by the time I'm 25, I'm a failure. And I had to live, I had to go and move at home. So I lived at home until I was 29. But when did I think I was addicted? It was, I moved back. I tried and then failed, but I moved back into London again when I was about 26, 27. There were other things going on, but like relationships, and I was in a band that split up, and I had a business venture that had failed, and lots of other, it's just life, isn't it, basically? But gambling was almost kind of my go-to escapism and stuff. But when did I think I was addicted? It was probably then. It was probably 2017. I'd gone to, I'm trying to think in the timeline, but I basically split up from my girlfriend. I just walked out, and I'd been gambling heavily. I'd given up as a football refereeing, and that was probably when I thought, hang on a minute, there's something really wrong with me, which then later led to self-excluding from casinos, which was another rock bottom moment when I went to London to do my quote unquote Christmas shopping, which was just complete rubbish, basically. So probably around, in terms of dates, probably around sort of 2017.
Was this still really lonely at this time? Did anyone else know? Did other people around you feel like something was wrong, that you had a dependency on it, or was it very secretive?
It was very secretive. I remember I spoke to a friend the first time I moved out of London, and I kind of people knew I liked to bet, but then quite a lot of my friendship group bet. So it was just like, oh, it's just, he likes to bet, he likes to drink, whatever, fine. It's just normal. And I remember speaking to one of my friends, and I sort of said, like, I can't really, I'd gone with the intent of telling him, but actually I hadn't told him. I told him the half truth. So the half truth was the fact that I didn't have any money, but I didn't tell him why I didn't have any money. And he said, well, look, why don't you move home? And then, no one really picked up on it. I think people picked up on the fact that I'd gone really kind of pretty loopy. I was experimenting with drugs. As I say, I was just not, I was a ghost of my former self. I remember there's a couple of photos from that time in 2000. I just looked horrendous, like awful. As I say, just because then when you're gambling late into the night, you've got lack of sleep, you're tired, all these good things that you share on your podcast, and with the whole mental health thing as well. And you know, it's like a given thing, isn't it now? Good sleep, good diet, good exercise, but all of those have gone out the window. And then from that, you have the stress, you have anxiety, and then the depression. It was just, yeah, it was horrible. So yeah, I think people picked up on something was up, but they didn't know it's the gambling. No.
I think it's hard to know how to broach it, because, you know, it's typical. It's similar to some conversation I had with Sophie early on in this podcast. It's these things are normalized. They're everywhere. Like, we see gambling and alcohol in every walk of life, on the telly all the time. Like, we're never away from it. And it's not like drugs, for example, where we've all got a little bit of a negative connotation to all of that. Like, you know, it's wrong. Whereas these things aren't deemed wrong at all. They're just deemed as normal. Everyone does it. You haven't got to worry about it. But that perhaps makes it easier to miss that people are having a problem with it.
Yeah.
So where did you turn when you realized this, something's not right? Did you go and look for help straight away, or did that take time?
Oh, that took time. That took a lot of time. I agree, by the way. Yeah, you're right. Like alcohol, drugs, it's like we get told about those and those addictions in school and the harm and stuff, but not much on gambling. I mean, I'm sure I'll come onto this a bit later, but yeah, I mean, so I self-excluded from casinos. I'd kind of got to the point where as I say, in 2017, I was just completely fed up. Like, what is going on? I'd gone to London and spent a month's wages in the casinos all day. I gone to do my Christmas shopping, which was, as I say, a cover story, and spent all my money like within the first half an hour. And it was the only time that anyone ever said, I was the only one in the casino, but it was the first time anyone had ever said, what are you doing? Like, you should take a break. And you know, intervention. And that, again, that will come on. I'm sure I'll come on to that a bit later as well. But that was the first time I realized, oh my God, the cat's out of the bag. Someone knows that I've got an addiction. I've got a real big problem. And I don't think it's any coincidence that day I then self-excluded. I came back on the train from Paddington back to Newbury. I, like, as I say, was living back home with my parents, and self-excluded. Rang up the National Gambling Helpline, and just like all they wanted was my details and my address, and that's all they needed. But I was just ready to a bit like I am now, just spilling out my life story, because it was just like, whoa, geez. So that started the wheels in motion, because I stopped going to the casinos, which was my big thing. I was still going to the bookies. I was then betting online. So I hadn't, you know, where there's a will, there's a way. And a lot of people with gambling addictions will tell you that if you know, you've got to want to stop. So fast forward a year, 2018, I started to kind of, the self-exclusion was great, but I then started to get private counselling. I'd lied. I'd gone there and I was, again, told them half truths. I had a lot of ongoing issues, but the one thing I didn't tell them about was the gambling. So after 3 or 4 sessions, they were like, "You're fine. You're great. You're good." I was able to hide it, you know. So yeah, and then from that, pretty much just get him a life, just get him a ship back to, you know, what's the story? I was going to swear then, sorry, but get a ship. Yeah, not the other one. Just trying to get my house back in order, really. So yeah.
Was it a relief when you phoned the gambling line to get yourself excluded? Was that a relief when you did that?
Oh, massive relief. Yeah.
And do you think if someone had questioned you years before, that it might have had the same impact, or do you think it was a matter of timing as well? Like, you had reached a point where you were feeling a bit more desperate from it?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a big believer in, I think because you see these like safety messages, and certainly online on the Twitter sphere and stuff like that, the you know, the community that I'm now involved in now, you see a lot of rhetoric around responsible gambling, and you know, you see at the bottom of the adverts,
stop.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, when the fun stops. But for someone with a gambling addiction, it's like trying to tell someone to stop drinking. It's like, well, they're not going to stop drinking. You know, there comes a point where the barman's got to say, right, you know, enough is enough. You're not going to get served here anymore. But that was never really happening at all with gambling. So yeah, we can get very political, but yeah.
I think politics definitely needs to get involved with this problem. And with when you had your counselling, the fact you said that you were trying to hide it, why do you think that was? Did you not want to acknowledge that it was really a problem, or you didn't want to show a vulnerability?
A bit of both, really. It was my safe place. Like, gambling was my safe place. Like, I could forget all my problems. I could go and literally just time stopped, and it was I knew it was a problem, but I just, personal pride, didn't want to admit it. It's really, really hard to describe it, and this is what's such a tricky thing, because unless you've gone through it, it's just really, really hard to describe. Because with a drug or alcohol addiction, you can kind of see that, I guess, but with gambling, you can't. And I suppose with the counselling, I wanted to kind of get myself sorted, but gambling was like, I was still gambling very heavily at that point. There was other things to sort out, like I was released as a footballer at 16, and that had literally like a chip on my shoulder for like 10 years. And there was other things to sort out, but the gambling was
never as simple as one thing, is it?
Exactly.
Often addiction is a coping mechanism for something. It's a response to something else quite often, and just depends how it comes out. And hence you've named your podcast The Invisible Addiction. You're absolutely right. There are very few telltale signs. And actually, something I would love to ask you is, are there any telltale signs? Are there things that we may notice of other people that might be a telltale sign that they might have a problem with gambling?
Yeah, good question. I think, well, it is quite easy to hide. Well, quite easy to kind of hide. I think the way we are, everybody, myself included, kind of addicted to mobile phones now. But it's very easy to hide, because now gambling can be done online and obviously on a mobile phone and apps and stuff. So if you see someone on a phone, you might just think, well, they're just on WhatsApp or Instagram or whatever. But they could well be betting. Like lying, or if they're being quiet, if the person is kind of not being themselves, as it were. Mood swings, definitely. Snappiness, like anger. I'm sure I can't think of anything off the top of my head, other things, but yeah, those are some signs, I'd say. Yeah,
no, that makes sense. And with the people that you've talked with, do you find that generally, if you are addictive with one thing, you can easily push that across into other things, either to switch the coping mechanism, or in fact just going for all of it, because it's possible?
Yeah. It's really, there's a lot of people that I speak to, myself included. Then I was just like really addictive personality. So it wasn't just the gambling. It was like, I took up smoking. I would chain smoke whilst gambling. I would take drugs. I would drink. It was just like, right, come on, bring it on. Let's just, let's do all of it,
Button
press.
Yeah,
definitely. And a lot of people I've spoken to have had, I'm generalizing now, but alcohol addictions, use of drugs. So they kind of almost kind of come hand in hand, really.
So how did you stop?
Great question. I get asked this a lot, because it's natural. You want to know, don't you? And everyone's story is unique. So like we've already alluded to, or, it's like, well, it's not just the gambling. There are other things that go on, as I say, it's just called life and coping mechanisms and stuff. But how did I stop? Great question. The self-exclusion thing was great for the casinos, because I couldn't go in. How did I feel
like it's a really good thing just to go into if people are sort of perhaps curious about it. Like, you literally can't get in the door. Like, how does it work?
So it's really embarrassing, because trust me, I tried to get back in, because I was like, this ain't gonna work. But they like, casinos have got really, really hot security. So they just they've got cameras everywhere. They've got barriers as you go in. You have to put your card, you have to go up, and even if you're not a member, So I think it's part of, I should really know this, I think it's called the Moses scheme, or is that for bookies? I can't remember. That's terrible for me, isn't it? But yeah, it's a scheme that it's for every land-based casino in the UK will have a photo of you and will know your name and your details. So yeah, I tried, as I say, I tried to get back in to another casino once without a membership, and got away with it for one time, and then the next time they caught me, and I thought I was going to get in trouble with the police. It was awful. yeah. I don't advise it. yeah.
Okay, so sorry, I completely ruined your flow because we were saying about how you managed to stop gambling, essentially. So you started obviously with that phone call that stopped you being able to go into casinos, but obviously there was so much still accessible to you on your phone, the bookies, etc.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, because now I've kind of stopped, and you see what's available and stuff, and you realize that actually there's a load of tools that you can use. So you can use like GamStop, which like blocks you from going onto the websites, and to ban you to log on and things. And there's another app called GamBan, which blocks betting devices, betting apps and stuff on your devices. There's a new app called Recover Me, which is an app which you can download, and it's got like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and lots of really cool things. The NHS are now opening clinics. I think 14 new clinics in the next 2 or 3 years for gambling, which is great. But yeah, in terms of me, it got to last year, sort of late 2019, and I'd had enough. And it was a real gradual phase. As I say, from 2017, self-excluded. But as I say, it wasn't until like 2019 when it was just completely, I was just fed up of it. I was completely fed up of it. So,
did you feel like it controlled your life?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. There wasn't a day when I just didn't think about gambling. It was like, I have to gamble, or I'm in debt. How am I going to get out of debt? I need to gamble. Or I've got money. I'll go and gamble. I'll go and win. Yeah. So it completely just took a grip of me. Yeah.
Do you think that became easier? I mean, I'm sure, again, it's perception because I'm, not being heavily into these things, but has it made the situation worse, just how accessible it is now? Because as you said, there's so many gambling apps and different types of gambling. You can do it so easily. You don't have, obviously some people might never have wanted to step foot in a bookies, but you can gamble without leaving your couch. So I'm guessing that's made it a bigger problem and more easily done.
Yeah, 100%. So this is the thing. So we in the UK we have the Gambling Act, which is from 2005, and it's still in place. There's a review at the moment, kind of going through, and the 2005 Gambling Act was based on a time before smartphones existed. Wi-Fi didn't exist, but yet here we are now in 2020, and we've got it on our phones. We can bet 24/7. 365 days a year, wherever you like. I was doing some crazy thing. I was betting on while sat on the loo for like half an hour. I was just betting. I was betting next to my girlfriend in bed in the morning, at night. I was betting on obscure Australian or football games. I didn't have a clue what was going. So it's become so accessible, and the crazy, the crazy thing is now that you can, it's the young people that are betting as well. There are now, there were 55,000 young people addicted to gambling between 11 and 16, but there are now 61,000. That figure's gone up. So on, games like FIFA, there's this thing called loot boxes. So you can use your parents' money to gamble and buy a pack of players and to see who you're getting. There's stories recently in the press of young lads like as young as 12, like gambling and losing thousands of pounds on roulette, using their parents' accounts, and it's a real big problem. It's sorry, that sounds like I'm toning it down. It is a massive problem, but we like to sort of, doing the British thing, we like to avoid these problems, don't we?
It sounds like it's accelerating at a mad rate, I have to say. And there's a question that popped into my head that I really want to ask you. Do you remember when it stopped being about the game and started being about the gambling?
Yeah, good question. I mean, what for, like football or just stuff like that?
I
Or
don't know if you had like a moment that turned it, because at the beginning, like you described how that moment on the roulette machine got you that buzz.
Mm.
But then in that conversation, you were very much talking about how you would be gambling on anything. So there must have been a point, perhaps it was gradual, maybe you can't even put your finger on it, where it went from being about specific types of gambling to whatever you could get your hands on, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, so this is the actually a good point. A point I should make is, by this point I needed money. I had no money, perpetually in an overdraft, and I view gambling as a way to make. I literally viewed it as I wanted to make it a job. So that's how deluded I was. I was like massively into the roulette. Then I stopped doing that. I was then going into blackjack, thinking, because there is an element of skill in blackjack, but watching all these documentaries, I think the MIT University, is it university? Yeah, I think in Massachusetts or whatever, this famous documentary that they went and beat the casinos. I think it's called 21, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's quite a good film. But yeah, I was then betting, was like, right, if I've got 10 quid, I need to make that 20, and then I need to make that 50. And then I need to make that 100 and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I was then just betting on like everything I could, because I just viewed it as a way to make money.
Yeah, it makes sense. It just flips over, doesn't it? There's so many ways I want to take this now, but I'm going to take it slightly controversial, maybe, because you brought up the problem this is becoming with kids and growing up, and the Gambling Act and the fact that's being reviewed. I mean, do you think we're at the stage now where this is getting out of hand to such a degree that we need to start reining back where we can gamble?
Yeah, it's a very good question, very, very good question, and a big question, and I won't have all the answers, but yeah, I mean, so like, for example, in Australia, you can only play casino games at the casino. You can't play casino games online. They also have like a blanket TV and advertising, TV advertising and radio and stuff like that. They have that ban from, is it like 5:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night? You know, they're quite a leading example. But it's so hard, because obviously gambling is, you know, it's an economic thing. You know, the gambling companies want to make money, and but there's some awful things they do, like VIP schemes. So for the people that are gambling the most, there's some horror stories of people that are on VIP schemes, and how they're kind of hounded and chased down, and with loads of free offers and holidays and trips away to kind of keep them betting. So I don't know if we're going to be able to kind of stop certain games, but we could certainly do things like we could put limits. So at the moment, online, you can play unlimited amounts on slot machines. So every time you press spin, you could be betting up to, I don't know, 200 quid a spin. And these things spin like every couple of seconds, which is nuts. You know, in bookies previously, you could, on the roulette, you could bet £100 every 20 seconds. That got reduced down to £2, which was awesome, because it took me out of bookies, which was good. But yeah, so you can do things like that. You could do affordability checks. So you could look at the customer and see if they can afford it. I feel that's probably quite hard to sort of introduce, but I think the biggest thing I'd like to see is maybe intervention. So that person coming over to you, whether that, you know, be online or whatever, and just that kind of customer care, really. But then obviously that is an ethical issue, because the other company going to want you to stop spending money with them. That in itself is a bit of a conundrum. So that's where you say, you know, should there be tighter regulation, and you know, or should the companies take more responsibility? It's an absolute minefield, to be honest with you. Yeah.
It's very difficult, isn't it? You can see that it's always going to be a balancing act, because as you say, there's so much money involved in it, and they're not just going to make it disappear. And not that you ever could make it disappear, let's be honest. You know, you don't need these companies to gamble. They just make it a hell of a lot easier, and easier to spend a lot more money. But I don't think we can under how important it is that this issue is dealt with is of the utmost importance, because I think so many people firstly don't notice it, so it's a very secretive thing, and people get to extreme dark depths, some of which is to the worst point, which I know you've covered in your podcast, and it means it's something that has to be implemented. We just, I guess, within the community that I think you're working with quite a lot, figuring out the best ways to do so, because it isn't something to be taken lightly, because people's lives are potentially in danger and businesses can still make money and people still be kept safe. And I think that's a really, really important factor when they're making these decisions as to how they can advertise it, etc.
Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, I feel quite lucky. Is that even the right word? I don't know. It's so, you have to be so sensitive around this because people ultimately take their own lives because of it, and it's dreadful. It's absolutely dreadful. You know, I genuinely, you know, I wouldn't wish my darkest thoughts on anybody, not even my worst enemy. It was just horrific, absolutely horrific. But yeah, the harm it causes. I mean, I think statistically they say there's like, I think a YouGov poll came out recently. I think it's 1.4 problem gamblers in this country. You know, 1.4 million people. And you think about that, the people that impacts and then affects, you know, the family members, the friends, you know, how do you
know someone? Yeah. We all know someone that is affected by it.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, at the moment, the gambling companies, there's a voluntary levy. So they give, so they would make, I don't know, I think 2018, 19, they made maybe 14 billion or whatever profit. 2 or 3 billion goes to the tax. So obviously, you know, the government benefit, you know, but then they have a voluntary levy. So they would pay 10 million. The gambling companies would I can't even get my words out, would voluntarily, okay, I'll start that. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm all right. I'll do that again. So no, basically, they would put in money to this pot, 10 million pounds, which is voluntary. Some people would, some people wouldn't. It's a bit of an embarrassment with some of these companies that literally just will put in like 50 quid. But they've now raised that to 100 million pounds, which is amazing, which is going on a lot more treatment and stuff like that. But I don't know about you, but I believe prevention is better than cure. So I think education is where it starts. And we can throw money and kind of go, yeah, we can help all these people. Obviously, that's needed. That's really important. But let's start with a prevention and going into schools, which, by the way, is encouraging, because in England, they have just made it compulsory on the PHSC days, whereas before it was just drugs and alcohol and sex and stuff. And now they've got gambling on that. So that's good. That's good.
It's only recently really being recognised as a problem.
Yeah, 2013. It's absolutely bonkers. Yeah, like, oh yeah, it wasn't a problem before that. Didn't exist. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah,
it's crazy how long it takes for some of these things to actually settle to being seen as a problem, even though it seems so obvious, but apparently not. And you know, here's a question. Again, this is a difficult one for you. I know you can only do it from your experience and the people you've chatted with, but if someone is listening to this who does like to gamble, and of course, plenty of people can gamble very sporadically and it's just fun, as we discussed at the beginning, or whatever else, very harmless, not addicted in any sort of way, as far as they believe. Are there any signs that you would say at the moment to perhaps go and talk to someone, or just think about whether it might be becoming a problem? Are there things that sort of shift into that from being fun to actually being an issue?
Yeah, another really good question. Yeah, I mean, it's. I think it's the mindset. I think, you know, if you're gambling more than you can afford, you know, how often are you doing it? How often are you thinking about it? Are you doing it? What types of betting are you doing? Are you chasing your losses? I think that for me, that was a big sort of telltale sign. Yeah, do people even know about it? Are you doing it alone? Are you? Is it taking up your headspace? Are you thinking about it all the time? That that would, this and the speed of it as well. If you're just gambling like 20 quid and you're having a few bets at the weekend, like fine. I think sports betting is quote unquote fine. And I've got to be really careful because different addictions and stuff. But I think the casino games, especially roulette, slot machines, blackjack, the virtual games, the slot machine, all that kind of business. I think that for me would be like, okay, the alarm bells would start ringing. So yeah, I would try and take a break. Just say, right, I'm just going to have one day off, or this week I'm going to have 2 days, or whatever it would be. Tell someone about it. Tell someone that you trust. Just say, look, if you've got 5 minutes, I just need to share something with you, and then speak to them and just be honest. Because for so many years I wasn't honest, and if you can be honest with someone, you'll actually find that I think on the whole they'll be very supportive and help you out. So
people do want to help. People always want to help, and it brings me to another sort of area that I'd like to address. It is mostly a male-dominated problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
And men often do talk less, so I'm guessing it's all comes together as to why it's such an issue. How do you think we can best address that? Like, obviously these apps and stuff are great. How do we get, well, actually I'm just going to say people need to listen to your podcast, but I guess opening some doors that then makes you more likely to open up is a really good way of doing it. Feeling a bit empowered and like you're not alone, listening to podcasts like yours, and I'm sure you've got other places you can direct us to as well that will just make you realize that how you're feeling isn't unusual, and there are lots of other people in the same boat, which I think can help allow you to then speak out.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really weird because when I was kind of going through my gambling addiction or towards the end of it, I never thought, I didn't Google anything. I mean, there was Gamblers Anonymous, which I was, again, personal pride, it wasn't for me, but a lot of people do it and take comfort from that because you speak to others, and it's very relaxing speaking to other people and hearing their stories. And, being on this kind of online community now, you realize that, yeah, you're not alone. And you also realize that, oh, hang on a minute, there's other people that are like wired like me. Because for so many years you felt completely alone, and you just felt, I feel completely alien. I don't feel normal. I feel unemotional. I feel numb. I feel completely different. Completely different. Like, what is wrong with me? So when you kind of reach out to these people, you meet other people that have experienced the same thing. It's incredible, because you're like, okay, so you're one of me. Like, you're my, I can relate to you, and we've got something in common. So I think the hardest thing is actually reaching people, because that is the tricky bit, because for so many people there's a lot of people, myself, you will relapse, you will have you might gamble again, and then for as I say, there are other people that will not find a way out, and they will unfortunately take their own lives. So I don't know. I don't know. I think we can do that through education. And now I'm on the other side of it, if, as it were, there is so much available help and support. But it's just, it's just tricky reaching.
It's getting it out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now you can find it. And did you find a lot of the stuff before you started your podcast, or did starting your podcast allow you to find more, or a little bit of both?
Oh yeah. So before this, so I know I've just reeled off like some sort of Wikipedia kind of thing for gambling, but no. I mean, I knew nothing about this, absolutely nothing. And then it got to lockdown, and a chap in our local community took his own life. It's well, as I'm sure it's tragic. And it kind of spurred me to release a podcast about my gambling addiction story. And before that, I thought, well, I'll just tell my story. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, I want to do this justice, and I want to find some facts. And then you just literally scratch the surface on just a basic Google of like gambling addiction, or gambling addiction in the UK, or going on YouTube and searching some documentaries, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my goodness, there's so much here. So it's probably been a bit of an obsession, but yeah, it's crazy. So in answer to your question, I've learned all this stuff like after I've had experienced the gambling addiction, as it were.
Yeah, so you're sort of slowly coming out of it, and then almost now your way, I guess, of moving forward is to help others, to educate others, to understand more for yourself, I guess, as well. It allows you to get over it, because it sounds like it's taken over a whole decade of your life and taken it down different pathways, which has ultimately led you to this experience. And now you can have a voice that can help others. And I think to be able to flip something that's been so dark for you to the other side, I assume can really help. I want to assume, but I'm guessing that would be true.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I haven't gone to Gamblers Anonymous, but I know that on the 12-step program, the 12th step is like sharing with others, helping others. It's just great. It's just selfishly, it's like therapy. Every time I do a podcast, it's like therapy, like you mentioned, just sort of trying to come out of it and help others. And that's the main thing with all of my guests. It's we just say, if we can just help one person, if one person listens to this and goes, yeah, I'm going to sign up for GamStop, or I'm going to do this, or going to do that, and it's just win-win from all angles. So that's great.
So what are your top tips for you personally? I know everyone has to find their own pathway if they need help, but what helps you stay on track now? I guess now you've shared your story, the people around you help, but what decisions do you make to keep you from being tempted too often?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think now people know about it, so it's accountability. So it's like, well, other people know I'm now gamble free. People will actually check in from time to time. My mum never knew about any of this, but she will kind of ask me now, kind of quiz me a little bit. So you have support of family and friends, which is good. Obviously, doing the Invisible Addiction podcast is like almost an accountability check, because it's like, well, it keeps me busy and stuff. So yeah, time is basically the big one to fill, because you'll kind of come out of a gambling addiction and I spend hours every day, most days, gambling. So time is the big killer. And you'll come out of it and you'll think, well, I feel horrendous. I feel so bored. Anyone that's had an addiction will know this, that when you've got an addiction, every day is a good day, because you're able to sort of fill it up with this injection of endorphins, as it were. So that's the hard bit, is filling it up. So you could write a journal, you could take up exercise, just putting your life back together, which is, as I say, I'm sure, as you've mentioned many a time on your Instagram page and through the podcast and stuff, but better sleep, exercise, good diet, better mental health. You could write a journal. I find writing's really cathartic. For me, talking is, I'm an absolute chatterbox. So like, even, podcasts like this is great, because it's again, selfishly, it's almost like therapy. Speaking to other people, and there is a good online community. There's a Facebook group, Gambling Addiction Recovery and Support, and I think there's like 2,000 members, and people are literally on there. You get people on like day one who are in absolute desperation, and you get other people who are on that journey, as it were. So people that are a year down the line, 2 years down the line, 50 days down the line. So you kind of have a lot of support that way. Twitter's great as well. Can be a bit toxic at times, but yeah, there is loads of support available, basically. So
it's worth having a look, even if you're not 100% sure if you need it, because there's obviously people out there that one needs support and want to give support. So it's a nice balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'd just like to go a little bit more into your podcast. So I think with a lot of addictions, people have a lot of assumptions perhaps about who and what kind of people and all those sorts of things, like who could be. Addiction has no sort of favoritism. It doesn't choose particular people from different backgrounds and ignore the others. Like, it can literally hit anybody, can't it? Like, give a bit of a summary. Who have you talked to on your podcast? And hopefully people can pop over and listen to them.
Oh right, yeah, no, you're very, very kind. It's it's so I mean the first sort of there's 6 episodes in the series, and there's been 2 series, so it's nice and straightforward. I'm doing another 3rd series, but in terms of guests, the first series was like just getting together a bunch of people that I knew. So like I speak to Becky, mental health nurse, who I think we both know. Emily, who's a school teacher, I think we both know. By the way, they didn't have gambling addictions, but yeah, I mean, an ex-professional football player who's in his 50s, he had a gambling addiction. Oh my goodness, trained hypnotherapist who's is amazing, talking about getting to the root of your addiction. Former gamblers, so there's quite a few former gamblers that one's a businessman, another person is a journalist, another person is similar to what I'm doing, is in this sort of the online space helping others. And then series 2 kind of like took on a bit of a kind of campaigny kind of aspect. So there was I spoke to a chap who is one of the leading psychologists for gambling addictions. I spoke to a woman who works for GamStop. I spoke to a former CEO of Skybet. Oh my goodness, I'm not doing it justice. I can't think who else, but yeah, there's and the chap Matt Zarb Cousin, who was the guy that headed up the campaign to reduce the roulette machines to £2 a spin. So, but yeah, with series 3, trying to take it more as in like, I just want to help the individual. So rather than trying to change the world, it's now just kind of like, I just want to focus on people listening to, other people's stories and sharing that experience, and hopefully being able to sort of relate to it really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great mix, and I think that's exactly it. I think people are so often helped best by people they can relate to. So it doesn't matter, you can have 20 experts on an area, it doesn't mean you're going to listen to 19 of them. One you just click and connect with, and that's the person that can help you most. And I think that's why you can never have too many conversations about a topic that is so important, because of how toxic it can become.
Yeah.
And I just think gambling is definitely not talked about enough. It's really interesting. And I think it's also, I just think that when we started this conversation of the whole beginning of what even is gambling, I just don't think we think. And I definitely, I'm going political again, I can't resist, can I? Things like, as much as when you're playing a game, obviously there is an element of gambling whilst playing, but why is it in things like that? I mean, there's ways of these companies making money without having kids get addicted, because once that's in at such a young age, when they have no concept of what's going on, like if adults can fall into it, kids have no chance. And I just can see that there's definitely a need for change, and therefore the more we all talk about it, the more we can just be a bit more aware. Like, at least then if we have our eyes open, we might be able to stop it going too far. Whereas if you're kind of just falling into it without realizing, it can get too far, and then it becomes so much more difficult to get out.
Yeah, I think actually just two things that have sprung to my mind of from listening to what you've just said. I mean, like sport and football and the normalization of gambling sponsors is just incredible. I think 60% of the top 2 divisions in this country are gambling sponsored. Have gambling sponsors. The perimeter boards around the football stadiums. I think there was, just the normalization to young kids that love football. And I think there was something recently I saw that like a kid as young as like 6, named their teddy bear like Betway from the West Ham sponsor. Just crazy things. And then the crazy thing is in America, but bizarrely, like the UK, usually America's ahead of the game. The UK is leading the way in terms of like, addiction, the harm, but obviously we're trying to do something about it. In America, they've just legalized online betting from 2 states to 20 something or other states. So they're kind of copying, it's incredible. So we're on our small island, but it's just about to get, a million times worse over in the States, because they're not putting in, I don't think, adequate measures for education, prevention, harm, treatment, that kind of thing. And they're only just getting started. So
that's scary.
It's quite harrowing, really. So yeah.
It's I'm kind of speechless at that. I'm for various different reasons.
So sorry,
just think that
putting it down on things.
It's kind of fascinating though, isn't it? Because obviously when other countries already have something in place and things, let's say, have gone wrong, or certainly aren't where they should be, and they could learn from that, but yet still don't. It's kind of amazing. But I guess that's just where capitalism takes over, and it's nothing to do with people.
Exactly. I hear you, Vicki. Yeah, definitely. I am beating that drum as well.
I guess that's what we have to. We just have to get as many people as possible understanding and knowing about the fact this can be a problem. It doesn't have to be, but we need to have a little bit more awareness and perhaps just pull back. If you are into gambling, like as you say, if you can just try and do a day or delete the apps off your phone, or just almost test yourself, see how big a problem it is. Can you, these all of these things, and that's not just gambling or alcohol and anything, just the phones themselves, all of the apps are designed in such a way that make you not click off, because they are in some way making money from you, whether it's you actually do it. Sometimes just you scrolling is making the money. So therefore it is a massive problem generally with technology, but we're never going to remove technology now. We just have to find the balance, I suppose, and notice our own, this is like a recurring subject in my podcasts, of realizing your own issues, like what things hook you in. Because what might hook you in on one thing, another one might just not, interest you at all. It's like recognizing your own habits, your own patterns, and just every now and again breaking them so that they don't start controlling you, because they are designed to do that. Like, it's not our fault. It's not like, oh, we should tell ourselves off because we're being stupid or whatever. Like, we're not. They are clever machines, like the machines and the computers. I don't know if you've watched The Social Dilemma, Netflix. I
was just about to mention it. I was just going to say,
it's literally cleverer than the people making it. So it's not our fault, but we can be aware and try and just step back from it as much as we can, even just every now and again.
100%. Actually, one more thing I forgot to say was I'm gonna sound like I'm like an absolute downer here. Oh God, like just really like negative and stuff. But in all seriousness, I do worry with people being in lockdown on furlough. I think in the first lockdown they were showing like the stats had gone through the roof for people searching for online casinos. People are without money, without jobs, and you're bored, you're lonely. You're in your house all day, and for escapism, gambling answers all of those. Gambling answers all those problems, or would quote unquote solve those problems for a lot of people. So I am concerned.
I saw an advert on the telly the other night. It was a company, it was obviously a big company, but not like one of the most recognized. We just thought, we just Google it, and the shares have gone up astronomically since March. Like, it did a bit of a dip and then it's just gone up. So it is clearly a massive money-making opportunity for these betting companies, which actually means it's probably a massive debt costing period of time for people that don't have all that money to lose. And it is really sad, really scary. And like you say, it's not that you want to be like miserable and down about it, but we can't just it's the same with the obesity problem and all the health issues we've got. Like, we can't just close our eyes and hope it gets better. We have to start taking action and being empowered and having the knowledge to realize these problems are existing and potentially will get exponentially worse because there's nothing currently to control them. If there's not people like you and the organizations you're involved with really trying to shine a spotlight on it, because there's lots of us, and the more of us that know about it, the more influence we can have on those companies as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
See, I think I'm already about halfway through the questions. I think I've thought up like
it's cool.
brief a few extra little bits that I would love to. Are there any recommendations that you have? Are there any books you've read, or I know you've mentioned the Facebook group, or any websites or apps that you would say are like your top ones to go to get some help, and or just information, if you just want to be a bit more aware, if you're a parent with kids that you're a bit worried about, if you've got any sort of direction to take them in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's like I said earlier, there are loads like available. There's quite a few podcasts out, not just mine, but there's another podcast called All Bets Are Off, After Gambling. I can't think of the other. All in the Addictors Gamblers podcast. There's a number of podcasts that are always good to listen to. You can get support from groups. They all begin with GAM, so like GAM Care, GAM Fam, GAM Stop, GAM Ban. It's GAM everything. But yeah, they're great. The NHS, like I mentioned, we said earlier that there were only two. It only came about in 2013. The fact that gambling addiction was seen the same as drugs and alcohol. There are, I think, 3 Northern clinics, and there's 1 in London, but they're now opening NHS clinics, I think, in the next 2 or 3 years. Yeah, about 14 of them. So there's going to be way more awareness of those. So you can drop in, and they're not just for people that are experiencing gambling. It's people that have experienced harm as well, so affected others, family members and friends. You could always speak to your doctor. Actually, doctor's a really good protocol. They'll be able to provide you with a lot more information, even just a simple Google search of things available. So yeah, Google's probably the first protocol.
Yeah, there's so much there, isn't there? It's about reaching out, and that's such a good point about the GP as well, because I think sometimes if you're worried about something, it's difficult to know who to start talking to, because we're not the most open of societies, as you brought up earlier. The old English stiff upper lip isn't always the most helpful. So actually, perhaps looking slightly out of your circle might be an easier place to start. Because the likelihood is, if you are very open with the people close to you, you would have anyway. You'd probably already have brought it up. So I think sometimes thinking of some slightly outward people that can give you the right support that you need is probably a good place to go. And there's a question that I like to ask everybody, but don't worry if you can't think of anything. But I like to say, are there any myths around gambling, perhaps you thought yourself before learning and experiencing differently, that you would like to bust?
Oh, good question. So what? So like, is there any myths around gambling that I thought? Yeah, okay. So like, gambling doesn't affect like people. Like, it's not a problem if I'm chasing chasing losses. That's a myth. Like, it's or the myth of like, I've had a few losses, but I'm going to win now, so my luck will change. Myths like, if I've got enough money, I'm fine. It's not going to affect me. I'm fit and able, and stuff like that. And it's for, people that, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. There's quite a few myths around gambling. So, I
have an interesting one, actually. I've never done this, to flip reverse. Is this a myth that you think is true? The house always wins.
Oh, yeah. That's a really good point. It does. As my friend always says, you never see a poor bookmaker. So
they never go down, do they? You just get more and more of them. It's like the adverts all the time. Like, there's another one. I've never seen that one before. There's another one.
Oh dear. Quit while you're ahead. There we go. That's another advice. Yeah. Bit of advice.
So I want to start bringing to a close, because I appreciate the time you've given me already. But if there is one thing that you could share with everyone, what would it be?
Oh my goodness. For a person that likes to talk, you've made me, I'm now speechless. If if there's one thing, what, like with the gambling or just in general, or I don't know.
Like,
oh my goodness.
It's always
oh my
in their
goodness.
tracks. I'm so bad. I should always give this question, but I kind of want you just to go from the heart.
Yeah, I know. I'm a bit of an overthinker. Talk. Just talk. Talking is amazing. Especially with social media, we can be very silent and just like prefer to just text or whatever. But talking is good. I mean, it's hard obviously with lockdown because we can't have face to face, much or as much human interaction. But talking is really, I think, undervalued. So yeah.
See, caught you off, but that was one of the top answers I think I've ever had. It's such a good one, and it's true because for so many issues, all we need to do is talk, but talking helps, and actually sometimes it's just that first step to help is what we need. Yeah. So can you tell my audience where they can find you on the internet? And I will pop it all on the show notes.
Yeah, sure. The Invisible Addiction on Instagram, on YouTube, on the podcast is on Spotify and iTunes and other things like that. The Invisible Addiction, and then it's Addict Invisible on Twitter. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. The time flew. Probably still have another 100 questions, but I really appreciate it because I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for listening to episode 34 of the Live Fit Now podcast. I truly loved that conversation. I think it's such an important subject. Please do click on any of the links in the show notes if you need some more information or support following that conversation. I am so grateful to Alex for sharing his own personal story and allowing us to really dig deep in the subject of gambling. Please remember, we would love to hear from you, so you can get in touch with either of us via social media. Email me directly, hello@livefitnow.co.uk. I would be extremely grateful if you could review the podcast, and please do share with your family and friends, whether that's through word of mouth, sending a link to the episode that you think a friend or family member might like, or of course you can share on your social media. Thanks for listening. Until next Thursday. I'm ending my episode today with something a little bit different. I'm going to sponsor my very own episode. So, the Live Fit Now Club has just launched. The Live Fit Now Club will help you become the best version of yourself. It is a monthly fitness and lifestyle online membership, giving you the structure and guidance to create healthy habits and be stronger, fitter, and become a more confident version of yourself. The Live It Now Club gives you structure and guidance to your workouts, as well as helping you create and follow a healthy lifestyle that lasts. No quick fixes or fads, but fun, progressive and realistic workouts and tools to build a fitter, stronger and more confident you. The standard club membership includes 24 structured workouts each month that is designed by me. So there are 2 live morning classes, 2 live evening classes every week. There will be a pre-designed workout program that is put on the app for you. That includes 2 workouts that you can choose from home or gym. There is access to a growing library of online classes, so you can do that 24/7. The tools allowing you to use templates for goal setting, weekly planning, monthly planning, habit tracking, meal planner and more. And such an important part is the community, and you'll be part of the club group on the app, where you can chat with other members, ask questions and support each other daily. This online platform truly gives you so much support and guidance for long-term results. If you're interested to find out more, head to livefitnowonline.com.